And everyone, we're just waiting for a little bit longer, but Kensington, just for you to note, and for everyone here, we will not be submitting or taking any comments. Oh, excuse me, everyone. So Kensington, if you could please rename yourself to ask questions here. And I don't know how much of that was muted, but in essence, how this is going to run is you will direct all questions. We're going to give a presentation. All questions will go through Kensington, and she will copy and paste them onto a running document that we have, and then we'll answer questions that way. Kensington, are you clear with that?
Yes.
And do you have the document open?
I do.
Wonderful. All right, so I know we have 44 people still in the waiting room, but I'm going to get started so we can give you the most time that we can give you. All right, everyone, so welcome to this breakout room. Just to clarify, we're doing the Neponset area of Boston, Dedham, Norwood, Walpole, South Shore, Braintree, Randolph, Milton, Canton, and generally routes that run through the South Shore. My name is Marley Bellinger. I have been the lead community liaison throughout this project over the past couple months. I'm joined here with my colleague, Linda Lally, who is a service planner in this region, and Kensington Little, who is currently our note taker for the evening. This session is being recorded, as well as we are recording your comments for public record. I am going to share in the chat here some of our feedback forms and main project page, so you have the correct resources regardless. Feel free to ask or message Kensington if you need them again. But without further ado, I'm going to just quickly review that, again, DMs only for messages once we get into the question and answer session. Send them just to Kensington, no other person. If you send it to me and Linda, we will not be able to record your comment. And you are free to leave this room at any time if you want to go to another room. You have to click the leave room button in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can go to a different region if you so choose. So we will be here until 7:30, but that is the game plan. I am going to begin sharing my screen and we can jump in with Linda. All right.
Thank you, Marley. Good evening, everyone. As Marley said, my name is Linda Lally. I work for the MBTA, and the South Shore is the area that I normally do for bus scheduling, planning, routing, and of course, for the Better Bus Project. As they said earlier tonight, there were 85 changes made of the 133 proposed routes in May. So tonight we're going to go over only those routes that actually have had a change since May. Some of them include new routing. Some include restoration of existing routes. For instance, the 201 and 202 in the Neponset area that has been referred to tonight was supposed to be supplanted by Route 20, and we have changed back to the 201 and 202 as presently configured instead of moving to the Route 20. We've added or subtracted routes. As I said, the 20 is gone. Also, there was a 237 proposed, which was to go to the South Shore Plaza, which of course we already had the 236 and 238 to go there. So it was deemed redundant, and the 237 is gone, the proposal to change it or to even create it. So extensions of some routes and modifications to frequency and span of service. And I must say, we have many more on the South Shore that changed to frequency and span of service. No change since the May proposal. So if you've been following along, everything that we proposed back in May to the 217, the 220, the 222, the 714 and 716, have no changes since the May proposal. The frequency or span adjusted, the 225, 226, and the 216. The 211 has been extended to have an offshoot of its main route go into Marina Bay. And rerouting to better serve medical facilities, senior housing, and other destinations at the request of municipalities, Route 34. The one, as I said earlier, we've restored to the existing route, but we have frequency and span adjustments are 240, 238, the 29, the 236, the 215, the 210, 230, 34E, and the 245, which, as you are familiar with the Quincy area, is the majority of our routes.
And if I may just jump in, so I recognize that can be kind of confusing for people. So we're going to take you through the slides individually for things that have changed, but then we're going to go into our remix map. We can zoom in. I already see a question about Quincy that popped up, so we can go through each route as requested. So please feel free as we go through to put your questions in the chat about the routes. All right. Thank you, Linda.
Okay, so if we can go to the first slide, which is bus route 29. It used to go from Ashmont to Franklin Field. As you can see on the left slide, it's just a short route. And we changed it. Now it goes from Mattapan to Jackson Square and the Orange Line. Felt this is much better use of our resources to extend the route this far, and especially have it go from the red line, so to speak, at Mattapan all the way to the Orange Line. Next slide.
And this is technically classified as a restoration of an existing route. All right.
Bus route 34. We used to go along Providence Highway. Now it will start at Forest Hills. It will go down Washington Street and service Legacy Place. And the 34E, although, do we have a slide for 34E? We do.
We do.
Okay. 34E is going to go from Walpole to Forest Hills via Dedham, which is again on Washington Street. Okay.
And I would, if
Okay.
I might add, on the Legacy Place 34E, the 34 connects into Legacy, but the 34E, as you can see, these maps look very similar being currently projected. But if you see on the rightmost map, that little grayed out L is no longer in the fall version. We're still in discussions, but again, in the fall version right now, that is no longer the case. And we also have extended service to 1 a.m. on the 34E. Okay, moving on.
Thanks, Marley. Okay.
Thank you.
Route 211. As I said before, this is one of the routes that has added a variant or an offshoot. You can see it just before it goes up into North Squantum. This is the little offshoot that will go into Marina Bay. We were asked by the city to provide some transportation to FedEx and the biology company that's out there. And this is our proposal. Okay. 215. Quincy Center to Ashmont. 1 second here. Marley, why don't you jump in?
Sure. So the 215 Quincy Center to Ashmont, this is technically considered a restoration to the existing route to Ashmont. And you will see Route 210 for the Fields Corner connection. So originally in our May proposal, we wanted to connect all the way up to Fields Corner. After hearing from the community, we're going to keep the 215 stopping right at Ashmont and connecting into the red line there.
Thank you. I'll take over for the 216.
230 is next.
Oh, we're out of order. Okay. 230. We restored it to the existing route and extended service to 12 a.m. Not even sure what we were going to do. We were thinking of stopping it in Braintree instead of going all the way to Quincy Center. But there was just too much feedback against that. So we are going to continue to go from Montello and Brockton all the way to Quincy Center.
Mhm.
I guess that's a restoration also.
Yes,
Okay. Who's next?
236 and 237. It's part of a package.
Again, we restored the existing 236 service to South Shore Plaza, and we replaced the 237. Okay, and 237 is gone.
Yep. All right. Now we have 238.
Right. We restored the existing Center Street, West Street, Willard Street, and Granite Street service instead of the I-93, and we extended service to 11 p.m. In other words, we went back to the original routing that served more people and responded to the city's request that we go back to the original routing.
And I would just like to emphasize that that's the reason why this exists, is this loop, that green loop at the top of it is primarily residential. So it serves the more riders is the reasoning for this route.
Right.
Perfect. 240.
Okay. 240 was, okay. The 240 goes from Ashmont and it either stops in Canton or it goes on to Avon. It's an every other trip kind of thing. And what we wanted to do was have every trip go all the way to Avon Square. But comments about that prevailed. And so we're going back to the original plan where every other trip will go all the way to Avon Square.
Mm-hmm. And this one also had an extension of service until 1 a.m. So you are getting a little bit later hours on this route.
Right. This was needed. Yes, very much so. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Back to the 210. 210. Okay. Where's my 210? I am really out of order, Marley. Okay.
Quite all right.
Okay, we restored the existing route to Fields Corner, and you can take Route 215 for an Ashmont connection, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So again, a restoration. And so you'll see and hear from us tonight that basically almost every route in Quincy and going into Dedham down to Walpole have been restored to its original. I shouldn't say Dedham, that's changed dramatically, but almost everything in Quincy was restored to its original configuration.
Mm-hmm. This being said, there are some fluctuates with the frequency. So we can still talk about and elaborate on that as needed.
Right.
Perfect.
So,
all right.
okay.
So that actually brings us to the end of our formal presentation. I am going to just quickly make sure to ask a question in this moment, send a chat to Kensington Little, or if you're on your phone, *9 to raise your hand. We are going to be here. I can pull up our remix map as needed. So let me get organized here for a minute. I do see one question, Linda, that we can start answering. And it says, from Artemis, what changes is the MBTA expecting to see in Quincy following redesigning bus networks? How has Quincy communities responded to these changes, and will there be future follow-up changes in Quincy? So if you want to take the service planning side of that, I can talk about the feedback a little bit.
Certainly, as I said before, mostly the Quincy routes have remained as they were before. with the exception maybe of the 216, which used to be 214, 216. That will stay the 216. As much feedback we've received, it is still determined that it makes more sense to have it as the 216 instead of the 214 and 216. The 230, the 240, the 245 gets a little bit more service, expanded service. But other than that, almost every route will remain the same.
Yep. And I will just say, based on our public feedback, we did have a good amount of comments from Quincy. Me and my team went down there a few times. We went to Ashmont Station. We went to a lot of the bus stops. So we had a really robust public feedback process in Quincy, and we even did some, internal outreach to see what the operation side of the MBTA thought of our proposed changes. But the proposal was quite popular in Quincy. So I can say that this is a caveat for all of Bus Network Redesign, that we have a 5-year implementation plan. So ballparking 20% will change every single year. But in that plan, the MBTA isn't just going to go away. We have a team who is taking this project and plans to continue to engage with the communities and make sure we can get this project underway. So I hope that answers your question. If it doesn't, feel free to put something else in the chat. But right now, I don't see any more questions at the moment. But me and Linda will be here. And again, I will just share this with everyone while we're here. We do have, for any specific questions, a more route by route, road by road breakdown of this entire map. So again, Quincy would be over here. I don't know if we have any questions or want us to go over any routes, but even if you want to put, let's talk about, let's talk about changes to the 27 or 217, excuse me. We can do so. So, do I see any other questions at the moment? And Owen, I know, are you on a phone? I know we're not taking questions verbally, but.
Owen McDonald has his hand raised.
Yeah.
I spoke to him today.
Huh. Oh yeah, let's yeah, I will ask to unmute Owen McDonald's briefly. Okay, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Owen?
No, he's still. Oh,
Can you
there
hear me?
go, Owen. Yep.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. First of all, Linda, thank you very much for consideration of what we spoke about earlier today, the small routing change on Route 222, the East Weymouth route. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Sure.
Other folks from town had hoped to be on this meeting tonight, but there was a conflict. So I was asked to pass on a couple of comments from them, if it's appropriate at this time.
Sure.
Okay. And then these are, again, reiterations of requests that had been made previously. First one is with regard to a service to or lack thereof currently, to a housing development. It's the largest family housing development in town that's owned and maintained by the Housing Authority. Would tend to be an equity situation, and it would seem that right now it's a good 0.8 of a mile away from the nearest bus stop, and by a not too distance-wise, not a very large rerouting could be served by bus route 226. This would be instead of coming up Middle Street from Columbian Square in the inbound direction, reversing the outbound. But what it does right now is turn right on Route 53 Washington Street and take Route 53 into Weymouth Landing. To serve this this development, what could be done was it could continue straight up Middle Street, coming from Columbian Square to the intersection of Lake and Essex Streets, turn left on Essex and go into Broad Street and left on Broad Street and rejoin Washington Street, close to Weymouth Landing. Very little extra distance, and again, would serve a environmental justice location. It's 190 units, I believe, in that development. The second one was with regard to also Route 226. If the gap between the end of that route at Columbian Square and the South Weymouth commuter rail station could be closed. Again, just pointing out that there are approximately 1,500 multiple housing units in multiple multiple residences, multiple buildings in that area between Columbian Square and the South Weymouth station, including approximately 500 new ones, either occupied or under construction in the immediate vicinity of the commuter rail station. There is a significant push right now for, and emanating from the MBTA and from the DCHD for development near bus and train stations, and Weymouth has tried to be on board with that from the outset by building near the stations, not only South Weymouth, but about 500 new units at the vicinity of Weymouth Landing, and another couple hundred on the drawing board near East Weymouth. But digressing a little bit there, but again, the gap between South Weymouth commuter rail and Columbian Square, the other thing that does not do is provide a link. The other thing that we do not have now is a link between the newly developed area near the South Weymouth station and new development in the former Naval Air Base. Between there and the South Shore Hospital, which is right at Columbian Square, and again, the request that if that link could be filled, if service could be provided between the commuter rail station and in Columbian Square, presumably by extension of Route 226 to serve that. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, that's wait, don't
Thank
leave
you.
us. Okay, so from Columbian Square, of course, I was really lucky this past couple of years to get the 226 because it was so justified by South Shore Hospital. The commuter rail station you want us to extend to is about how far?
I believe it's 1.5 miles, though I'd have to double check that.
Okay, yeah, I can check, but okay. I don't think that represents something that's outrageous. But then how far would you say it was to the Naval Air Base?
The Naval Air Base in essence starts at the commuter rail station, the access to it.
Oh, okay. So we're talking 1.5 miles to service both the commuter rail station and the Naval Air Base and 1,500 more housing units. Do I have this right?
Essentially, yes.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a walk from the station to the development in the Naval Air Base, but people do it to take the train.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you very much.
It makes perfect sense. And as Marley said, and Doug in the beginning, is we expect this to take 5 years. So information like this and requests like this certainly can be entertained as we go along. I'm sure there'll be more changes before we're actually affecting the 226. These are definitely some things we can check out.
Right.
So thanks very much. And your other comment earlier today, we want to get this on in the notes also. And that was that Route 222 right now continues up North Street to 3A.
That's correct.
Proposed. That's proposed. I said this wrong. Right now, it takes a left on, was it Bridge Street? I can't remember.
C Street.
C Street,
C
sorry.
Street.
it takes the 222 inbound, takes a left on C Street and then hooks up with Route 3A further on. And we've rerouted it to have it go all the way up North Street to 3A and then come across. And the proposal he makes is one that should be considered because on that section of 3A, we already have the 220 and there are no stops on North Street all the way up to 3A. So we'd have to start putting in all new bus stops up there and we don't even know about the accessibility. So
And
I wanted,
if I may flag, sorry, I see two more questions. I don't want to cut off this discussion,
Right.
but I want to make sure we
Fine.
get to everyone.
I just wanted to make
So-
sure it got documented in our note keeping and not just in my conversation
Absolutely.
with Owen.
Mhm.
Thank you, Owen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Owen. And I also just wanted to note, so as our project manager, you heard from him earlier state, within Bus Network Redesign, all new bus stops that we're adding will be accessible. That is part of one of our goals of our project, is new bus stops that we add will be accessible. But I just see two questions that are going to be on deck. I'm going to group one just because it's relevant. Linda, we got a question from Gordon about explaining changes to Route 226 and also when can we expect this new service to begin. But Artemis had asked before that I can answer after about the priority concerns when planning this redesign. So we're going to have Artemis on deck just because we have the 226 in front of us right now. So to rephrase, Gordon said, Linda, can you please summarize our changes to 226 and when will the new changes begin? That answer is we don't have an order for implementation quite yet. So we're still trying to figure out, what makes sense internally, especially as we're doing such a massive project. So new changes, I can't say when. I do know it's incrementally over the next 5 years. But then 226, Linda, in my knowledge,
We have
outside of,
nothing prepared. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're extending service to 12 a.m.,
right,
which of course will mean more frequency because we're not going to leave a gap between 7 p.m. and midnight. But yeah, we do not have any proposed changes on the 226 other than those proposed just now by the previous caller.
wonderful. And then I think this is something that I can reiterate for everyone. So Artemis Huang asked us, what are the priority concerns when planning this redesign? Are the concerns from residents, from the agency, or maybe both? So I'm really glad that this question was answered because I was one of the people on the front lines of this. So this was the biggest outreach event in the entire history of the MBTA. We got over 20,000 comments from the public on our network, and we made significant changes, as you heard from us, to close to 80 plus of the 130 routes, give or take. So the public had significant input throughout this process, and that's something that we're all very proud of here at the T. But in terms of what are our design principles, equity first is our biggest one. More frequent service in busy neighborhoods, more all-day service. As you can see, our extensions into the night. We wanted to provide new connections to more places, so we surveyed our residents to see where they couldn't get to via bus before and where can we connect them to now. We wanted a network that is simpler or easy to use, which is why we had that discussion about, it was eventually restored, but the alternating routes, it goes one direction one time, another direction another time. We tried to minimize those so it could be simpler for people to use. And we wanted to improve reliability and accessibility across the network. So those were our design principles. And this is all, again, if you talk about MBTA priorities, I can say, the first question that comes up is, are our budget constraints worried about this? And I can say that this bus network redesign was budgeted within our network. So, happy to talk a little bit more about that. But again, it's really a rider first design, I can confidently say, throughout the process. And again, happy to answer more questions on that. Linda, I don't know if you have anything else to add. I see one.
No, excellent.
Wonderful. I see one comment for more frequency in the 238. from Andrew. I don't know if you wanted to elaborate, Andrew, but I do know currently, what is the current frequency on 238? Not as familiar. The 7 to 11, 30 minutes or better, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., I believe, is the frequency. Let me see.
We extended it to 11 p.m. Yes,
Yes,
2:38. Yeah.
yes, I hope that answers your question.
So that means per force, we will have to put a few more runs on. But it
Mhm.
being a very strange route where it goes to the South Shore Plaza, and we don't have a lot of demand for that early in the morning, but we did feel that, especially during this time of year, people are working later. Not sure they're shopping later, but the stores have people working later. So we wanted definitely to extend, to give them the possibility of taking it at 10 or 11 at night.
And if you can see on the screen share too, I mean, this is not set in stone, to say the least. This is kind of for our planning purposes, the schedule to the left. But it does give you a good sense of, in general, what we mean by we adjust an adjusted frequency. So I'll just scroll down so you can see what we're planning. So wonderful. Do I see any more questions? I see another comment from Andrew requesting more frequency at rush hours. I can just briefly comment on our design principles is throughout Bus Network Redesign, like we have these high frequency routes. So they come every 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week, and that is across the network. So the goal of that idea, as we talked about, and I can explain more if anyone's curious, is throughout all of Boston, we want you to have a couple buses where you can show up and you don't have to check a schedule. So it's 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week. So that is the goal of Bus Network Redesign. And we have 25% increased service across the network overall. So again, we're trying to balance practicality with the best service that we can provide. But yes, that is my answer is we especially paid attention to where the highest demand was when we were looking at this project. I think we're getting a follow-up question on 226. Let me pull it up and then we can share it. All right, so I have a question from Gordon Johnson. Follow up on 226, what will the expanded hours be for Saturday in the morning? Also, what will Sunday hours be? I'm happy to share my screen, Linda, to give you the benchmark to talk on. But
Well, 7 days a week, we service the hospital every 30 minutes or better from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. In the middle of the day, of course, is it's an hour or better, depending on how quickly we can get there. The main change on the 226 is that you can take the bus back and forth to the hospital until 12 a.m., till midnight.
right. But then again, these are our just tentative projections, not set in stone, but for the 226, it's roughly every hour. I think it's fair to say. It's the hour frequency every 15 minutes. Wonderful. And I believe the Saturday and Sunday hours are, at least for this one, the same, or at least that is the plan.
That's the plan.
Wonderful.
7 days a week. Every 30 minutes or better? During rush hours, the way we sort of parts it out. So that means every 30 minutes or better from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and then 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. rush hours. And then an hour, every hour during the rest of the day. And then from 7 p.m., of course, to midnight. It'll be every hour service.
Do I see any more questions? Right now, I don't think we have any, so feel free. Even if it's just, I'm confused about this route, or I feel you didn't answer this. The goal of us being here is to make sure that people who come and want their questions answered feel like they were heard. So there is no stupid question, in my opinion. But also, if you feel we did a good job answering your questions, you can also feel free to hop to another breakout room if you have a question on another route that maybe this presentation doesn't encompass. And yes, feel free to jump around. I will say, I think we do have a smaller breakout room, so if you do have another question, we can try to answer a question for a different route, maybe in less detail, but we can try our best, not in Quincy or the South Shore. All right, so I have a question from Artemis. You mentioned these are projections. How might it be different in reality? What is the usual gap between projections and realities? Yeah, that's a good question, Artemis. So I think I don't want you to misinterpret my words. I meant that they're projections, not in terms of the actual frequency that we're giving you, but in terms of whenever I share my screen here and you're looking at this remix map, we can see like projected run times, etc. These are not our final calculations. We're currently going through the process of testing every single route and making sure that implementation, we have incredibly accurate numbers so we can make sure it's running like a well-oiled machine, if you will. So when I say projections, I really mean the frequency is not a projection, that's our target. However, with anything, the goal of implementation is to make sure that we are as accurate with our scheduling, as consistent with our scheduling as possible. But I can say that part of Bus Network Redesign and simplifying these routes for the MBTA, but also for our bus drivers, means that it's easier for service planning and scheduling to iron out some of the funky things that might cause bus bunching, etc. So I don't know, Linda, if you have any thoughts on that, but yeah, these are just projections in terms of our model that we're showing you, is my answer.
And I'm sure you heard Doug explain at the very beginning of this presentation that we have a finite number of buses right now, and we are doing our best to get rid of, to lower our carbon level by moving to electric buses, which will take place over the next 5-10 years. And of course, doing that incrementally will change some of the plans we have for scheduling. These are what we'd like to see done. When the rubber hits the road, or as you said, you know, what's really going to happen, it will change. But we have a lot of things going on at the T at the same time, I'm sure. If you open the newspaper every day, you'll see we have a calamity going on at the MBTA every day. We would like to provide service, more service. We have, as I said, a finite number of buses. And right now, we also have a finite number of drivers. And we're hoping we can increase our employment of drivers so that we can offer more service. But even still, this plan, no matter what it looks like to anybody, is increasing service by 25%. That's huge for a place like Boston that has, you know, 1 million people moving on any day on 5 or 6 different modes of transportation on buses, on subways, ferry boats, commuter rail. The trolley buses just went out of service. The Silver Line, we have a lot of transportation, and to say on buses that we're increasing service by 25%, it's just huge. I could quantify it for you, but you would say, that doesn't mean anything to me. The number's so big.
Thank you, Linda. Yeah, I don't see any more questions currently on the floor. I know that the plan is currently still to adjourn at 7:30. So we have roughly 15 more minutes left. I will say, let me make sure that you all have access to our revised map. I know I dropped those links in the chat in the beginning, but this is currently our main revision page, as I just put in the chat. We have translated explanations as well as the breakdown by route if you wanted to research yourself. Also on this, you can see linked. I can actually show you also, you feel confident in using this. We have our remix map linked within this webpage that I just shared with you. So you can zoom into the roads yourself. So I wanted to make sure some people missed that statistic. And also, again, this is a more abbreviated form because we have some breakout rooms with more people. But if you want to submit a written comment, we do have the ability or portal to do so here if you wanted a more long form comment. Let me see. So yes, I have no questions on the floor at this time. Me and Linda are here. And again, feel free if you have no questions for us to migrate, but we're not kicking you out. So, so I see
Somebody
a hand.
raised a hand. Do you see that?
I do. Okay, I can ask to unmute you.
Good evening. Are you taking questions verbally or by a chat or both?
We are trying to delegate to via chat, but we have a smaller breakout room and 15 minutes. So I see that you did type one, but feel free to verbalize because now we have it on record as well.
Yeah, great. So my question pertains, I believe I spoke last time on the second as well, but essentially pertains to the 34 and 34E and specifically the service levels being proposed there. Currently, the daytime service, meaning, for example, at 12 o'clock noon on any given day of the week is approximately 15-minute frequency across the 2 routes. And on Sundays, about 20 to 25 minutes, depending on which time of day it is, whether it's 10 a.m. or 2 p.m. And so it seems that under the proposal, at that point in time, at 12 noon, say 7 days a week, that would go down to 30 minutes for the 34, and then 60 to 90 minutes on the 34E, roughly, which would be, around 20 minutes per bus if you factor that in. So, right, it seems like three buses per hour. And so does that represent a net loss of service on the 34E? Or, is it rough? Does the proposal, propose to keep roughly the same amount of service hours across the board? Obviously, there are probably some slight frequency increases during the late evenings, like around 11 p.m. or something, but just wanted to clarify that. And then related to that is the fact that, for example, routes 216, route 95, route 90, and then the 74 and 75, both or all of these routes individually have much lower ridership than 34 and 34E combined today. Those services, so the 216, the 95 and 90, are getting those are getting 20-minute service through 10 p.m. Daily, and then the 74 and 75 are getting 30-minute, each getting 30-minute frequency, meaning 15-minute coordinated between Belmont and Harvard. And so again, those routes are lower ridership today. And so I was just, wondering, does it represent a net loss for the 34 and 34E? And obviously, there are some trade-offs in terms of the extension to Legacy Place, but I just wanted to ask if the MBTA would be, what the considerations might have been there.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would your destination be if you took either the 34 or the 34E?
For example, from Forest Hills to the middle of Washington Street, but before the 35 joins at Stimson. So from
Okay.
Forest Hills straight down that stretch, which, and beyond the 40, so a little bit beyond the 40.
Okay.
Before the
so-
40 turns off at West Boundary. Yeah, sorry.
But staying on Washington Street, right?
Staying straight on Washington Street after the 40 turns off, but before the 35 joins in.
Mhm. I believe we checked on this right before our meeting, Linda.
Yeah.
So I have it in front of me. We checked with the team on this one because I think I remembered a similar question asked in our last session. And the 34E essentially has no frequency or span changes outside of, we have the extended service to 1 a.m., which does represent, increased
Right.
service in terms of time. But in terms of how this affects it, right now the plan is no frequency or span changes for the 34E. The 34 has slightly more frequency. I'm not sure, Linda, if you know more about the breakdown of that based on your conversations today, but that was what I had within my notes, and I can also pull it.
Yeah, nope. You've got it all.
Wonderful.
And just a very quick follow-up, is that relative to today or to the May proposal, the slight increase?
That is to the existing network.
The network
because
today, okay.
We actually dropped down the frequency in my memory of the 34E. It was every 60 minutes or better within the May proposal. And then we heard public comment, and I myself am a 34E, rider. So I commiserate. But we heard a lot of public comments about that being a hardship. We calculated a lot of our public comments based on what type of comment it was. Is it a route criticism? Is it a hardship criticism? So we wanted to really hear people on that route. So that's why it was relevant to today. It is no change, but relevant to May, it is an increase.
Okay, thank you.
Hello.
Thank you. Hi, Andrew.
Hello. Yes, I have a couple pointers. First, I must say thank you so much for the presentation. But what is lacking is this closed captioning. So in the importance of inclusion, I could have a hidden disability that I don't even want to share with you group, but you're not facilitating inclusion for me. So next we need to have closed caption on all these meetings.
So we do in fact have a closed captioner. I don't know if you can see the button, Andrew, but right on the bottom hand of the Zoom, there should be a closed captioning button. My apologies if you didn't see it. Feel free, next time, raise your hand or ask a question to Ask a Questioner. But again, we currently have a closed captioner for this meeting, especially in the main room. But yeah, I'm sorry that you couldn't access that when you needed it. Do you see the button now?
Yes, yes, thank you so much. Just in general, I mentioned it and in the context, but also with the planning, is inclusion included in all of these bus routes that we're doing? I want to see it because I'll be on them and I don't see something. I'm still waiting on Martin Street to have covering for the disability and the elderly. There is no shelter, bus shelters on Martin Street, and I'm still waiting on that. Another thing we need to look at, yes, we can add new buses, we can take away, but the performance rate of on-time service, like international cities, I would love to see Boston, like Berlin, train are on time. I could time the train, pick up my coffee, and I get that train at that certain time. So how are we going to reach that level? I mean, yes, we can't hit ourselves. We might be at 30%. how can we achieve to 75%?
Mhm.
So thank you. And inclusion of climate resilience, very important. Thank you.
Yes, I would agree very much, Andrew. So just to take your questions one by one. We would agree. Just the first thing that jumped out was the frequency and making sure we have those timeable buses. I will say I'm actually going to take this slideshow from one of our other public meetings because I think it was presented by Doug. So we have these high frequency networks that we're emphasizing within Bus Network Redesign. I don't know if this slide was included today, but within this, this is kind of our goal or vision for making sure you don't have to check the schedule. Something comes every 15 minutes or better, 7 days a week. And with that, we made sure that it was an equity first decision as we planned this discussion. So making sure bus dependent, transit dependent neighborhoods were prioritized, making sure our elders were prioritized. That's why every new bus stop we're installing is going to be accessible within this network, so that you kind of hit the nail on the head of some of the priorities of this project. And also our bus network redesign is a part of our bus transformation initiative overall, which is what Linda alluded to with trying to make our buses more eco-friendly. So I don't know, Linda, did I miss a question in there? It's quite possible.
No, you didn't.
Wonderful.
Very
But
thorough.
yes, no, you certainly hit the nail on the head. I see, and thank you for all of your comments thus far. I see one more question or maybe two more questions or comments. So I have a comment from Andrew. What are the next steps? So next steps are currently, this project is being voted on through the MBTA board this week. And then we're gonna go through an equity analysis to make sure that, we're very confident we did our due diligence, but we wanna make sure we cross our I's and dot our T's and make sure it is as equitable as we want it to be. So those are our next two steps. And then once the board votes, we will go into our 5-year implementation process is the plan. And you can follow that all on the Bus Network Redesign project page that I shared with you within the chat. And typically we post, our timeline, our next steps, if we have another public meeting. I believe we will be having a public meeting potentially, or the results of the equity analysis will be discussed in the future as well. So those are our next steps to answer your question. I know we have 5 minutes left. I have a comment from Jordan. So as somebody who takes a 226 to work every day, thank you for expanding Saturday service and adding Sunday service. This will now allow me to work holidays as well. That's exactly why we took a look at this network, and I'm really happy to hear that. I take the bus frequently to get to all of my jobs, so it's not, this is the goal of this project is we saw a need and we're trying to fill that need is the best way I could put it. So thank you. We have 4 minutes left and Betty, I can see that you're raising your hand, so I can ask you to unmute.
Thank you so much for this meeting. I'll just keep this quick. So in light of the timeline and the board meeting so soon on the on this redesign network, taking into account all the feedback, I just wanted to propose or ask if it's possible at this point to consider routes that might connect, for instance, some of the bus lines radiating out from some of the transit stops. Just thinking about the map that was shown previously, the bus lines come out from these transit centers and these city centers, kind of like spokes from a wheel, but then it's not really connected. You would basically have to take one bus line from, say, Canton to some terminus to switch to a different bus line. Would it be possible or feasible at this point to connect these bus lines going across, or is it kind of too late for that process?
Yeah, thank you for your comment, Betty. I can say that that was one of our design principles when we were going into the beginning phases of this project. It's obviously from a resource management perspective, it's harder for us to connect those outer rings, but we really tried to connect cross town and cross city connections. I know like, especially in Everett, that was one of the examples we used where there's way more connections across that don't go into Boston and out. So I would say on a micro or smaller regional level of Boston, you can find more of those. And that was something that, is a goal. But, obviously the wider we try to extend on the spokes of the wheel takes more resources. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure we provide as much service as we can to the most people. So again, it's a hard trade-off, but again, thank you for your comment. And I definitely see where you're coming from. So
Yes, that's been requested and suggested and pointed out to us many times. Again, part of the restraint from doing that kind of thing is we go from all the way at the end of Hull, which is Pemberton Point, all the way to where do we go next? Brockton to Avon, up to Ashmont, passing Mattapan. And what we try to do is when we look at routes is see how they could connect to one of the rail lines, and that provides some connection for customers, riders, that is. But if you would plot on a map, like I said, going from Pemberton Point all the way to Avon, you'd see that it's just geographically too big an area to do this east-west. But maybe in the future.
If I may, just quickly, I see that we're getting kicked out. I can drop a link to you, Linda.
please.
That's what I mean. It would basically run along the south of the Blue Hill Reservation. Like, this is my thoughts, from Quincy Adams, and it would reach the Route 28 station, which I don't think is covered by any of the bus lines that were proposed.
Just real quick, we can talk about that, but just thank you everyone for joining our breakout. And Betty, feel free to also write a written comment for like the longer form, because it seems like you have a lot of good ideas. So feel free to go on to our comment form and write a longer form comment. But we've got 3 seconds, so thank you all.